The Netherlands and the draft national ordinance stipulating the budget for country Sint Maarten for the service year 2026. Meta's $1 trillion lawsuit could change Instagram and Facebook forever. BBC News. ECYS, SMDF, sign MOU for management and execution of slavery. Memorial Action Agenda. Court convicts 2 defendants in Jasmine investigation. From the island of Sint Maarten, this is SXM Daily News for August 20th, 2026. Public meeting of Parliament regarding ratification of the decision list of IPKO held in the Netherlands and the draft national ordinance stipulating the budget for country Sint Maarten for the service year 2026.
Madam Chair, I am here today to humbly present through you the 2026 annual budget of Sint Maarten to the Parliament of Sint Maarten for its consideration and approval. I do so knowing fully well that we are already in the 3rd quarter this fiscal year, and therefore this presentation is long overdue. I apologize for the delay and all several factors that contributed to the lateness. I take full responsibility for it. However, Madam Chair, this does not mean we should ignore the fundamental reasons for these delays. As I've said before, we cannot fix a broken system by burying heads in the sand like the proverbial ostrich and act as if it is merely a temporary hiccup. The delays we have experienced this year are symptoms of long-standing systemic inefficiencies that have developed many years and across successive administrations. Frankly, Madam Chair, I can that the deadline we have to meet by law for the presentation of the national budget have historically been viewed more as suggestions than strict legal obligations. It is not a secret, and it is nothing new in our governance system. For years, several administrations have had to grapple with structural and historical challenges regarding our financial cycle. We have inherited a system where timelines and deadlines were routinely missed, where various entities with financial reporting chain have failed to take ownership, and crucially, ours is a system in which simply no consequences for a failure to comply. In short, our political culture has not been conducive to timely budget presentations. It has viewed the national budget as a mere financial document rather than a political shapes policy, signals priorities, and when transparent and disciplined, serves as a cornerstone of democratic accountability. However, Madam Chair, I am not here today to criticize nor to defend a delay that should not be allowed to continue being the norm. Parliament, as the representative body of the people and the public we all serve, deserve a timely and reasonable finance cycle. That is why we did not just rush to patch over the cracks to deliver a put-together budget. Instead, we decided to do the hard work of structural reform. We chose to introduce steps that would ensure that the delays we faced this year would be the catalyst for permanent change. I can report, Madam Chair, that we have already begun implementing rigorous internal measures to ensure that the 2027 budget cycle and every cycle thereafter is approached when necessary to meet our constitutional obligations. The Council of Advice is scheduled to finalize its advice on the 2027 budget by beginning of next week, positioning the budget to proceed to Parliament within the constitutionally prescribed deadline. For years, we have spoken about breaking the cycle of late budgets, but every cycle is broken somewhere, and every change has a starting point. Madam Chair, sometimes it only takes one. Madam Chair, despite the delay in its document before you represents a historic milestone for Sint Maarten, building on the foundation laid down by predecessor whose hard work I acknowledge. It can be said that for the very first time in our nation's short history, the national budget has been designed and organized around a policy-based approach. The strategic priorities reflected in this budget are not developed in isolation. They are as much as possible aligned with the National Development Vision 2020-2030 and the Government Program 2025-2028, which states that a sustainable financial system is the linchpin for national development. Both the fiscal and revenue policies of St. Martin should therefore focus on building a sound financial system as a platform to facilitate growth in the economy. It will be recalled that traditionally, St. Martin was a line item exercise. We came to Parliament and showed you what spending money on: salaries, office supplies, rent, utilities, etc. This year, we are fundamentally changing that approach, no longer simply offering an overview of expenditures, explaining how and why resources are being allocated, what concrete results we expect to achieve for the people, and how every single Caribbean guild on the budget aligns strategic policy objectives. I would like to believe, Madam Chair, that this is a massive leap forward for better governance by shifting from short-term spending to long-term planning. This outlook also has greater accountability as it gives Parliament the exact benchmarks needed to measure whether the is actually delivering on its promises. Finally, policy-based budgeting allows for more transparent public finances, giving the public the opportunity to see a direct line between the taxes they pay and the societal improvements we achieve. In fact, Madam Chair, we are shifting the focus from to impact. This is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new way of budgeting, one that I believe will strengthen financial management, improve execution, and ultimately deliver better results for the people of St. Martin. Madam Chair, before I move to the next part of my presentation, I want to emphasize that this government remains focused on efficiency, fairness, and the responsible management of our finances. That means strengthening revenue collection, modernizing our law, ensuring that everyone contributes their fair share. We will therefore continue advancing the legislative priorities initiated in 2020, including legislation relating to anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism, as well as financing related to the spread of weapons of mass destruction. Measures are essential to protecting the integrity of our financial system and ensuring that it continues to meet the international standards established by the Financial Action Task Force. I will also continue to advise procedural tax legislation together with the proposed abolishing of land tax and the repeal of inheritance tax. At the same time, we will continue strengthening science and collection. Better collection is not simply about bringing more money into government. It is about creating the fiscal space necessary to invest in the priorities of our people. I also remain committed to Financial Literacy Month and in financial education across our society. A financially informed population is better equipped to make responsible decisions, build financial security, and contribute to a stronger St. Martin. Madam Chair, there is, however, one final measure that I believe speaks directly to the principles of fairness, accountability, and shared responsibility. During my review of government's financial obligations, I was surprised to discover that neither members of Parliament nor members of the Council of Ministers presently make an employee contribution toward the pension benefits attached to our political office. This has been the situation since October 10, 2010. What is particularly important, Madam Chair, is that Article 30 of the National Ordinance Pension Regulation Authorities provides for this contribution to be regulated by national decree containing general measures. Yet to date, the required framework to give effect to this provision has not been established. Meanwhile, our civil servants contribute 8% toward their pensions. Workers throughout our society contribute toward their pension arrangements. The situation is also out of step with our counterparts in Aruba and Curacao, where political office holders contribute toward their pension arrangements. Madam Chair, that is simply not fair. It is simply not just. I do not believe that we, as political office holders, should ask the people of St. Martin to carry a burden that we ourselves are not prepared. Under the present arrangement, when a minister or member of parliament becomes entitled to a pension at the applicable pensionable age, that pension obligation is ultimately carried by the public's purse without an employee pension contribution having been made by that political office holder. In simple terms, the taxpayer pays in full to all past and present political office holders. Madam, that cannot be the standard we defend while asking everyone else to contribute their fair share. Charity begins at home, but so must fiscal responsibility. For that reason, I sought and received the approval of the Council of Ministers to move forward with the introduction of an 8% pension contribution for ministers and members of parliament, subject to the required legal and legislative process. My intention is to advance the necessary steps as soon as possible with the aim of implementation as of January 2027. Madam Chair, it must be viewed as a structural fiscal measure. It is about fairness, it is about shared responsibility, and above all, it is about leadership by example. We cannot stand before the people of St. Martin and speak about sacrifice, fiscal discipline, and everyone's fair share while exempting ourselves from that very principle. If we expect the people of St. Martin to contribute to the future of this country, then those of us entrusted to lead it must be prepared to contribute as well. Fair share must mean everyone's fair share, including ours.
Are you SXM insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXM is cardless. Request your My SXM account today and enter the virtual office of SXM. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
SXM, yeah. Your social health insurances.
Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, Melissa D. Gumbs, signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the St. Martin Development Fund, represented by Managing Director Makichia Brooks. The MOU outlines the management, development, and execution of the 9 culture and heritage projects related to the Ministry's action agenda. Slavery Past. SMDF will execute the action agenda under the program designation Future Roots in cooperation with the Department of Culture within ECYS. The projects cover a wide range of critical heritage and cultural preservation measures, including upgrading of staff at the museum and SciMark, the development of local history curriculum, monument remapping and restoration, and most notably, a heritage scholarship program to build local capacity in heritage inspectors and managers. This is a significant step forward for our efforts in cultural development and heritage preservation, Gumbs said, noting that this was one of the first times where St. Martin was early with delivering their project plan and praised for the broad coverage of its projects. We are operating under fiscal constraints as a country, so I have prioritized the identification and response times to such funding opportunities. We must continue to put St. Martin in these rooms to understand that regional and international funding does not come without conditions, nor does it wait until you feel like answering. I applaud the Department of Culture for moving with urgency and intention on this matter, and I was happy to support in my capacity as Minister. Moving forward, SMDF will now begin outlining project timelines and deliverables alongside the Department of Culture. This will include consultation with stakeholders identified within the projects, which includes the Philipsburg Cultural Center, SciMark, the Museum, the Department of Education, and others. At this stage, the first two tranches received from the Netherlands, totaling $1.9 million, has been sent to SMDF as they prepare to begin executing their mandate under the MOU. Future Roots reflects a national commitment not only to preserving St. Martin's history, but in strengthening the institutions, knowledge, and people who will carry that history forward, said SMDF Managing Director Makisha Brooks. Our responsibility now is to translate the ministry's vision into well-managed, tangible projects the community will be able to participate in and benefit from. We thank the Department of Culture and the Ministry of ECYS for entrusting us with this process. The Court of First Instance has rendered its judgment in the criminal cases against MR and JEB, the remaining defendants in the Jasmine investigation. Both defendants were convicted of co-perpetrating fraud and money laundering. MR was also convicted of abuse of office. MR, a civil servant, was sentenced to 16 months imprisonment, 6 months of which were suspended, subject to a probationary period of 2 years. She was also disqualified from serving as a civil servant for 5 years. JEB was sentenced to 240 hours of community service and a 6-month suspended prison sentence, subject to a probationary period of 2 years. The court imposed lower sentences than those requested by the prosecutor's office, partly because the proceedings exceeded the reasonable time requirement. The cases concerned irregularities in the tendering and execution of several government projects following Hurricane Irma. At the time, MR served as Chief of Cabinet at the Ministry of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, VROMI. She also held a 50% interest in the company to which the projects were awarded. JEB held the remaining interest in the company. The projects concerned the Prins Bernhard Bridge, repairs to roadside barriers and railings, a basketball court, and emergency repairs to Keys Bridge in Sucker Garden. Minister Plenipotentiary of Sint Maarten, Dr. Anders Gracita Arindel, attended the presentation of the book Nieuw Nederland, e barrio cerca Avila Beach Hotel, Funda Riba Honor y Humildad, hosted by the Ocan Foundation on Friday, August 14th, at the Cabinet of the Minister Plenipotentiary of Curaçao in The Hague. Published in 2023, the book's author, Rensley Victoria, was born and raised in the neighborhood Nieuw Nederland, Curaçao. The publication makes an important contribution to the oral history of Curaçao by documenting the memories, experiences, and people who were shaped by the neighborhood they grew up in. For the book, 12 people from the area were interviewed, including individuals who had a positive influence on Victoria and his family. Among those featured are prominent persons connected to Nieuw Nederland, including former Prime Minister Maria Liberia Peters, alongside residents whose personal stories form part of the neighborhood's collective memory. The book is presented in Papiamentu, Dutch, and English, making the history of Nieuw Nederland accessible to a wider audience and helping preserve these stories for future generations. For Minister Arindel, who herself grew up in Nieuw Nederland, the presentation held special personal significance. She also highlighted the long-standing ties between the neighborhood and Sint Maarten, noting that persons and families of Sint Maarten descent have lived and continue to live in the area. New Nederland also forms part of my family's history, who hail from Sint Maarten. It is meaningful to see the voices and experiences of its people documented and preserved. This publication also reminds us of the strong family and historical connections between Curaçao and Sint Maarten, and of the importance of passing these stories on to future generations, Minister Arendelle stated. Minister Arendelle was presented with a copy of the book by Victoria, congratulated Rensley Victoria on his valuable contribution to preserving Curaçao's oral history, and commended the initiative for ensuring that the stories, people, and community spirit of New Nederland are not forgotten.
Now the local weather forecast tonight through Friday midday. Warm and slightly hazy with brief showers. Surface winds. Tonight through Friday midday, southeast to east northeast with a light to moderate breeze at 6 to 15 km. Sea conditions, sheltered areas, open waters. State smooth to slight waves, swells below. Up to 2 to 2 forward outlook through Saturday midday. Hot, humid, and slightly hazy with isolated showers. And now 3 days weather forecast.
Social and health insurance is your social and health insurance.
Are you SXM insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXM is cardless. Request your My SXM account today and enter the virtual office of SXM. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
Your social and health insurance.
BBC News report, 30 US states are suing Meta for over $1 trillion, accusing it of knowingly designing Instagram and Facebook to be addictive and harmful to children, while concealing what it knew. If they win, it could force Meta to overhaul the platforms for good, ending features like counts, infinite scroll, and autoplay video.
It's being called the largest consumer protection lawsuit in American history, bigger than cases brought against big tobacco more than 2 decades ago.
It's going to be massive if indeed this goes through. and it's going to have a huge impact on the company.
The clear distinction here with this lawsuit and with the other lawsuits, thousands of them in fact that are being brought in the US at the moment, that Meta and other tech companies knowingly profited from harm.
It would mean perhaps that social media becomes a little more boring for lots of us, which might make us feel a little bit better because actually we might not be trapped in those loops quite so often.
There should be an end to the scroll, but also I don't know if it would really work.
I think more controls would definitely make it better.
I think the main takeaway from this trial is that US states are saying that we need to regulate or change the design of these platforms and not just the content that we see.
So this is a major social media trial that is taking place in the United States. The tech giant Meta is accused of deliberately designing some of its platforms to be addictive to its young users. Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, is also accused of misleading the public. Meta strongly denies the claims, which it called unsubstantiated. They said the evidence will show their long-standing commitment to supporting young people. But if they lose, the trial could cost the company hundreds of billions of dollars. Joining me is our senior technology reporter, Chris Valens. Chris, why is this trial taking place?
Well, I think around the world we've seen growing concern about the impact of social media on children, and that has certainly been a very active and in many cases bipartisan debate in the US. In this case, what we're seeing is, in a sense, a sort of a new high watermark in that challenge as it goes through the courts, with 29 US states involved in this legal action, which effectively says that Meta's product was, if you like, faulty by design, that there were features in it that were designed to be addictive and were harmful to the company's most vulnerable users, in this case, children. These are, of course, claims that Meta strongly denies and will fight strongly in court.
So this is a major social media trial that is taking place in the United States. The tech giant Meta is accused of deliberately designing some of its platforms to be addictive to its young users. Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, is also accused of misleading the public. Meta strongly denies the claims, which it called unsubstantiated. They said the evidence will show their long-standing commitment to supporting young people. But if they lose, the trial could cost the company hundreds of billions of dollars. Joining me is our senior technology reporter, Chris Valens. Chris, why is this trial taking place?
Well, I think around the world we've seen growing concern about the impact of social media on children, and that has certainly been a very active and in many cases bipartisan debate in the US. In this case, what we're seeing is, in a sense, a sort of a new high watermark in that challenge as it goes through the courts, with 29 US states involved in this legal action, which effectively says that Meta's product was, if you like, faulty by design, that there were features in it that were designed to be addictive and were harmful to the company's most vulnerable users, in this case, children. These are, of course, claims that Meta strongly denies and will fight strongly in court.
Well, the trial stems from a lawsuit filed in 2023. Dozens of US states filed the federal lawsuit. They allege that Meta incorporated harmful features on Instagram and Facebook to drive engagement among young users, to boost profits, and then misled the public about it. This trial, which is set to last for 6 weeks, features 4 of those US states as plaintiffs. So that's California, Colorado, Kentucky and New Jersey. They want Meta to change the algorithms and to end autoplay. We'll have more on that shortly. But this isn't the first trial against social media companies. Our technology correspondent, Lily Jamali, explains.
A high-profile trial in Los Angeles this year where a jury granted a 20-year-old California woman $6 million on claims Instagram and Google's YouTube harmed her mental health. And in New Mexico, the Attorney General recently convinced a jury Meta deliberately endangered children, prompting nearly $1 billion in fines. Meta is appealing, but a judge has ordered more rigorous age rules and a stop to overnight push notifications for users under 18.
This is our SXM Daily Newscast. Thank you for joining us.